Welcome to Manifest Daily, the podcast where we embrace the messy, beautiful journey of self-discovery and constant evolution. I'm Dheandra Nicolette, podcaster, dreamer, and your partner in navigating life's transitions. Together, we'll explore personal growth, creative reinvention, astrology, and navigating life's unknowns. This is your space to evolve boldly, embrace change, and manifest a life that feels true to you. Let's dive in, my loves. It's time to create the next chapter together. Hello, my loves. Welcome back to the show. My name is Dheandra Nicolette, and today we are chatting about a topic that I am very, very, very passionate about. So I'm super excited for this episode. It is Thursday morning as I'm recording this, and it's another beautiful day out today. I'm so excited because it finally is starting to feel like spring. It's finally feeling like the weather is out of that like gloomy, just doom and gloom Northeast weather that comes with the winter. That is literally one of the things that I hate about the Northeast is like, where's the sun, babes? Where's the sun and why is she not here? This is why we all have seasonal depression in the Northeast, because the sun literally disappears for like 6 months and like we're just all unwell for that time. So like I said, my loves, welcome back to another episode. I'm so excited to talk about this because I feel like I want to gear this episode specifically towards settling in relationships. And I kind of want to talk about like romantic relationships is what we're going to talk about today. Because I feel like when we talk about not settling or when we talk about your standards, you know, people telling you that your standards are too high or whatever the case is, I think that can apply to a lot of different things. Like, you know, people could tell you that your standards are too high for the type of job that you want. Your standards are too high for the type of life that you want to live. Your standards are too high for the type of friends that you want to have, whatever. All of it, I mean, take this message today and you can definitely apply it to those other things. I do have some episodes that are going to be coming up soon where we're talking about building the life that you want and building the friendships that you want, the community that you want. And we will touch on this idea of not settling when it comes to those different aspects of your life. But again, for today, for the sake of this episode, I want to talk about dating. I want to talk about if you're single and you've been single for a minute, maybe you haven't been single for a minute, maybe you've been single for a second, okay? Whatever the case, the standards that you have set for the partner that you want, for the type of relationship that you want, they're not too high. You might just be meeting people that are not willing to meet you where you need them to meet you at. Okay? So if you felt that in your chest, if you felt that in your gut, in your heart, in your soul, when you either read the title or when you heard me say what I just said, this episode is for you and we are going to be set, my love. So grab yourself a little snack, some water. I have a cookie butter iced latte today. I'm so happy. I went to this coffee shop that's near the gym after because I had such a crazy good leg day today that I'm treating myself. I got an egg and cheese sandwich. I got a cookie butter latte with oat milk. And it is so yummy. And I get the large. This place only has small and large. They don't have a medium. But when I tell you, it's crazy because the large is like double the small. I mean, that makes sense size-wise. Like, okay, yeah, like give me my money's worth if I'm getting a large. But babes, why do I have to choose between small and large? Can you not have a medium? Because the small is so tiny, but then the large, I feel like I'm sipping on that iced coffee all day because I've literally been drinking it for like an hour and I have a good third of it left. It has 4 shots of espresso, y'all. I'm not well. I'm simply not well, okay? All right, so let's talk about this. Let's be honest with ourselves. How many times have y'all heard someone tell you that you're too picky or that you need to be more realistic or that you are never going to find all of what you want in one person? Or my favorite one is when they use relationships are all about compromise in order to get you to try to lower your standards. It's interesting because I had this conversation, if you will, with a family member recently. And this is kind of what inspired this episode because this particular person was telling me that my standards are too high. I actually haven't mentioned this in any episode so far. So I'll let y'all in on a secret. It's not even a secret, y'all. But I'm in a relationship now. I know. You're like, girl, you just got back to Massachusetts. You ain't sat down for 1 second, but you got a man. Girl. Yes, girl. Yes, girl. And that man came in at the craziest time in my life. I was like, wow, Talk about divine timing. Okay. But that being said, I was talking to this particular family member about this person because it just happened to be that they were in town when my partner was coming over and they were going to have to meet this person. So I was kind of giving them a little backstory, a little intro before the intro, if you will. It ended up turning into a conversation where this person was sort of telling me that my standards were too high, that it took me this long because my standards were too high, that if I didn't lower my standards, even in this relationship, that I would somehow manifest a reality for myself where I wasn't getting anything, where I was going to be robbed of the relationship, robbed of the possibility of, marriage and children and all these different things because my standards were too high. That was in some ways a triggering conversation because of this rhetoric that I simply don't like when people accuse me of having these high standards, because I think everyone has a right to decide what their standards are, especially when it comes to relationships. It's deeply personal. How you relate to another person, especially someone that you are engaging in intimate acts with, that you are possibly going to be building a family with, that you are saying, I want to be with this person forever. How you decide what your standards are for that particular relationship is up to you. I can't sit here and tell you, oh, you need to lower your standards. You ain't never going to find this and this and this and this and this. If that's what you say you want, and if you are willing to wait for that, if you're willing to weed through the haystack and find that needle that's your needle, who am I to sit here and judge your standards? I know for myself that I feel very confident in what my standards are, because I, as an individual, I'm constantly working to make sure that I live up to that standard. And if there's something that I need to adjust to feel like it's a little bit more realistic, or to feel like it's something that I can believe in, then I do so, right? So I want to say to you right now, your standards are not too high. If you know what you want, if you are very clear on it, if you have sat down and you've thought about this partnership that you want to manifest, and you've thought about the person that you want by your side for life, and you've sat with this intentionally, then that is the bare minimum for the life and the relationship that you're manifesting. Unfortunately, we live in a world where, and I'm going to speak for women at this point, okay? I can't speak for men, not a man, but we live in a world that tries to convince women, especially women that know who they are and know what they want and know what they bring, and I hate this term, but to the proverbial table, that they need to shrink, that they need to settle, that if they ask for too much, they're not going to get anything. They're asking for too much when they're asking for emotional intelligence and emotional availability. They're asking for too much when they ask for consistency, when they ask for communication and effort and presence. That is apparently too much. It's interesting because I was listening to this podcast a couple of days ago. This was an episode of Diary of a CEO. It was like a panel episode or a debate. It wasn't really a debate. It was more like a panel, even just a group show. And he had on Logan Ury, who I love. She wrote the book How to Not Die Alone. I think I've referenced that book before on this show. I might actually do like a book review of that, because that was such a good book. It really did change my perspective on dating, and allowed me to sort of see where I was being a bit closed-minded in the process. And there was another individual, I forget this person who he had on, but it was a male presence on the show, who could speak to men and dating and single men. And in this episode, they were talking about how years and years and years ago, in heterosexual relationships, a lot of women depended on men to bring the money to the table, and they were the stay-at-home wives and the stay-at-home mothers. And it was sort of this very split dynamic in terms of who did what. It was very clear in black and white in the relationships. And since women have been empowered to own things, to start businesses, to have their own bank accounts, to make their own money, to live a life where they are, again, more empowered, instead of us saying, okay, well, we just need a man who can bring home the bacon, so to speak, we are now looking at men to bring more to the table than just money. if I'm making my own money, yeah, of course, I want you to also make money too, right? I want us to kind of have like this equal household, but I also want you to come and bring that emotional intelligence. I want you to come and be able to communicate with me. I want you to come and be able to be a good and present father and a good and present husband and a good and present partner in this life that we're building. It's not enough for you to just come and bring your money and be like, okay, well, I'm paying for this. Like, what else do you need from me? And so with that, what we're seeing is a lot of women that are struggling to find men that are, one, I guess, fitting within what they see as almost the bare minimum for like the financial aspect of it, but then two, also that bare minimum from what's needed on the emotional aspect. Because unfortunately, in addition to how women have been conditioned to shrink, we also have men that have been conditioned to just see their worth in their money or see their worth in some of these more tangible things and not necessarily understand the power and the necessity of the emotions and these like softer feelings, these softer things. Again, I don't want to speak for men, but you hear it, you see it, how little boys are taught to not cry, right? They're taught to be tough and to be hard and to be just kind of like show up as a man. And women are allowed to be in touch with their emotions. We're allowed to be emotionally present and aware and understand what it is that we're feeling and talk about it with our community. Men aren't conditioned that way. So now we have women that are looking for men that are emotionally aware and in touch with their emotions, but unfortunately not many are. And maybe I shouldn't say not many, but again, the numbers, I don't have the stats in front of me, but they were speaking stats on the show. Okay, girl. So go watch this episode of Diary of a CEO podcast and it'll give you all the stats. But it just happens that it isn't that way for a lot of the single men that are out here. And yes, you can go to therapy and this is something you can work on. And so we are seeing more of that now, thankfully, in the later generations or the generations that are coming up now. However, it's still this struggle. So they were talking about how as a result of that, we're seeing declining marriage rates. We're seeing declining birth rates, and it's becoming an issue, like an issue collectively for our society in terms of like, okay, if men and women feel so distant, if they feel like there really is this sort of like gap between what each part wants and what's available, we're having less people enter into healthy and fulfilling relationships. I want to talk about the fear that comes with not settling, because I do understand that in some ways it's scary, because if you're someone that feels like, okay, I have these standards, I feel really good about them, I feel really confident that these represent what I really want in a partner and what I feel like I deserve, but you're watching everyone else around you couple up, people are getting married, people are posting their engagement pictures and their babies, and you're just here, healing, yes, growing, yes, but also waiting and also hoping. And I know people talk about it and they say, well, your single season isn't one that you want to sit down and wait. And I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that you're sat here at home waiting for a man and you're not doing anything. I'm saying that if you really do want partnership, and you're allowed to want partnership, you're allowed to crave that, because we are social creatures. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm single and yes, I have a thriving life, but I also want a partner. Deep down, it becomes a thing where you can start to wonder if you're going to be alone forever, if you're waiting on or wanting for something that doesn't exist, and whether or not you should just pick. You should just choose. You should just settle down for who's available. And I think that fear is extremely valid. But the thing that we have to remember is we cannot allow fear to push us to make decisions that we may and probably will later regret. We have to live our lives in alignment, because fear will have you choosing the things and the people that may look good on paper, but it doesn't sit right with your soul, babes. It doesn't sit right with your spirit. Fear is going to have you building a life with someone that you don't even like, that you don't even feel safe around, or you don't even feel like you can be your full self around. Fear will have you shrinking and quieting your needs, settling and lowering your standards, tolerating breadcrumbs, but convincing yourself that you really eating, but you wasn't eating, babes. You're not eating, unfortunately. I want to remind you that settling doesn't guarantee love. It actually is more of a guarantee of regret. You don't avoid heartbreak, or you don't avoid loneliness, or you don't avoid sadness by settling. In fact, what you do is just delay it. Because eventually, if you find yourself in a situation, in a relationship where you know deep down that you're settling, eventually you build resentment. Eventually, that disconnection you feel with that partner grows. And eventually, one day you wake up next to someone who was never meant to be your partner. That is an act of self-abandonment. Settling is an act of self-abandonment. And I know it's really difficult when people are pressuring you, especially when it's family. I mentioned that story earlier, and it's like, I know what it's like to grow up, and thankfully this never came from my parents, but to have people around you that ask you, when are you going to bring someone home? And especially if you're an older woman, once you get into your 30s, it then becomes, well, when are you getting married? When are you gonna give us some grandchildren? When are you going to do so-and-so? And it's difficult because I think, yes, society tries to paint singlehood as failure and relationships as achievement. And I also understand that you can, like I said, have this very thriving life as someone who is single, but still want that relationship. Hear me when I say that you can't manifest alignment. You can't manifest a relationship that is going to make you feel seen and heard and cherished by giving into pressure. Your standards aren't too much. They're a reflection of the love that you know you are deserving of and ready to receive. If you want consistency, you have to ask for that. If you want depth, if you want clarity, if you want someone who's willing to show up and tell you and show you every single day just how much they care about you, just how much they cherish you, then ask for that. And don't settle for anything but. Don't water down your needs. Don't water down the vision that you have for the type of relationship that you know you're deserving of just because you're tired of waiting. Just because other people are showing up and not showing you that's possible, because it is possible. It is possible. Someone is out there praying for a partner like you. Someone is out there praying for someone who is emotionally intelligent, who is self-aware, who is grounded, who is sure of themselves, who is ready to build. And they can't find you. You can't meet them if you're stuck entertaining these people that are not in alignment with who you are. They can't find you if you're caught up in these situationships trying to convince yourself that it's going to turn into something serious one day, because it's not. They can't find you if you're in scenarios where you're trying to prove your worth to people who were never deserving of your presence in the first place. This is your permission slip, because you are allowed to wait. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to say, nah, I want more. You're allowed to hold your standards sacred, because love is not just about having someone. It's about having someone in your life who feels very aligned. This is someone who fully sees you and chooses you, not just when it's convenient for them, but every single time. I want you to sit with an affirmation as we close out this episode. I am not asking for too much. I trust that what I want wants me too. And I will not settle for anything less than what I know I deserve. And you deserve connection that makes you feel seen. You deserve love that brings you peace and not confusion. You deserve partnership, my love, that feels like home, not a battle to be chosen. I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Thank you for spending today with me, spending this morning with me. I will chat with you very soon, and I hope you have the most beautiful and aligned day, my love. Alrighty, bye.